Welcome to Rock Island Line. I'm your host, Annika O'Melia, and today I'm talking to Antaeus Simmons. Antaeus is the founder of UTH Riders Association, also known as Under the Helmet. In today's episode, Antaeus and I talk all about the importance of safety, whether that's promoting safety on the road, in our homes, or in our communities. We dive into how Antaeus's life experiences led him into this work around safety and security, and what he hopes for his children's future. On that note, Antaeus's beautiful, sweet daughter joined us for today's interview. You may be able to hear her giggling and babbling and playing in the background. We did have to pause a couple times, and you might notice that there are a few spots in the interview where there is like kind of an abrupt shift, but overall, I think her presence adds to the texture of the important community work we are doing to keep our communities and our children safe. If you're enjoying the podcast, please like us and leave us a positive review. Head over to www.rockislandline.com to read articles. For example, today Antaeus and I touch on the topic of slavery in the United States, and I have a little companion article on the website that points out the differences between American slavery and slavery across the globe, because sometimes in the podcast I don't feel like I explain things very well in the moment. Antaeus and I have a wide-ranging conversation. I hope you enjoy it. And so without further ado, here's Antaeus Simmons. So I'm here today with Antaeus Simmons, who's the founder of Under the Helmet, or UTH Riders Foundation. And I'm so glad that you're here on the podcast today to talk to me about safety, not only road safety, but gun safety. And so nice to have you here.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated you having us downtown Rock Island. It's beautiful downtown here.
Yeah.
And thank you for letting me be on your radio station.
That's awesome. And we have a guest with us in case anyone notices. You have your daughter with you, and she's adorable.
She's the one that keeps me in line. She's like our VP of secretary, I guess, to make sure I'm on my toes.
Yeah, she's your assistant.
She is like, my assistant.
Do you need a piece of chalk?
Yeah.
And she might be behind me coloring on the wall too.
Yeah.
So she's our guest. Maybe we'll interview her at the end.
Yeah, so. She might likes it too. She's not really camera shy, I can tell you that.
So I always start the episode with, what is your connection to the city of Rock Island? And I know you don't live here, but you do work in the city. So what is your connection to Rock Island?
It's such a beautiful city. And I believe that with our connections and what we have and what our organization is trying to do, not just only in the city of Rock Island, but throughout the Quad Cities. And we want to make sure that Rock Island kind of come back to life. We know that it's been over years that people have been leaving, and we see a need, and we want to be that need. Yesterday I referenced just imagine a rock climber, and he's a novice rock climber, and then you have all the beginning rock climbers. If we don't extend that hand out to them, then we kind of leave them eventually to fall. So our organization wants to be that novice rock climber to help people get through their situations or whatever their needs are here in the Rock City of Rock Island.
So tell us a little bit about your organization. I think the first time I saw you was speaking at a city council meeting about Under the Helmet, or the UTH Riders Foundation. So what is it? What do you guys do? What are you focused on?
So we started this in 2022. Unfortunately, a reason why I started this was due to road safety. I lost two friends in a motorcycle accident, and we seen there was a lot of lack of awareness, I'd say, as such, just on motorcycles, but also the lack of awareness just on road safety with individuals driving on the road. And then eventually we got partnered with the Illinois Department of Public Health Injury Prevention. And during a lot of our meetings, we collected a lot of data, and we seen that not only was we needed on the road, but also on the public side safety portion. And that's where most of our programs come in from, such as our life saving practice program, which is huge here in the Quad City area. We teach Stop the Bleed, CPR, and AED for free. Just with recent shootings and how things have been going on, we want to teach people how to save a life.
Okay, so this started out of a personal loss. You lost two friends in a motorcycle accident and felt motivated or compelled to kind of get involved in making sure people know about how to be safe on the road. and then through getting partnered with the Illinois Department of Safety, started to look at other safety issues, especially around gun violence and if someone's having a crisis in public, if someone's been shot, for example, how to stop them from bleeding, how to do life-saving interventions?
Yes, and just not that. We've seen also in 2022, the suicide rate actually outbeat the homicide rate. In 2022, 1,526 people died to suicide, and 1,300 of that due to gun violence of suicide deaths. So we just don't only see the aspect of teaching someone to save life. This is why we give out our gun locks, to make sure we know that firearms are used in a situation where it's just not really thinking, just a straight thinking, and it's done. And by the time they realize it, they have to succumb to their injuries. So we give out the gun locks to prevent suicide or accident discharge within children.
So I think September is National Suicide Awareness Month, and so what you're saying is that when we think about gun violence, sometimes we think about homicide, but that suicide is actually the number one cause of death by guns. And if someone in your home is feeling suicidal, or if you have children and they impulsively do something with a gun, parents being able to have access to gun locks, to put gun locks on any weapons in the home is life-saving?
Yes, and there's a firearm restraining order in the state of Illinois that you can actually, if someone is having a mental breakdown or feel like they are suicide, you can put that firearm restraining order against them, and they will get their firearms back, but there's just steps they have to take to make sure when they receive their firearm back that they won't commit suicide. So there are places in order with the state of Illinois to be able to take someone's guns away that you may think that may be in harming themselves.
Wow. So I work in the mental health field, and so if we think it's kind of a routine part of being a therapist. If you think someone's really struggling with depression, you've seen them getting less and less interested in the things they used to enjoy. They're down, they're depressed. They maybe have changes in their sleeping or their eating habits. And you just notice that someone's really struggling. I think the recommendation is to ask people, are you okay? How are you doing? How are you feeling? And if someone tells you that they're just really down, they don't even know if they want to be alive anymore, they're, kind of telling you about their pain, that you are supposed to ask pretty explicitly, have you thought about hurting yourself?
Yeah.
And if so, in what way? Do you have a plan to do that? And I know from our field that if a person has a gun in the home or access to a gun, their rates of completing suicide go way up because it's such a final action. It's more lethal than other ways people might attempt suicide. And so if we find that out in our field, it's like if you have guns, we make a plan in the room for someone that you love to hold on to those, to get them out of the house, and that when you're going through that mental health crisis, that you shouldn't have access to such a lethal way to possibly harm yourself.
Yeah, and that's where that firearm restraining order comes in at. If you feel, do guns do actually, if police can take them, but they also can go to another family member. It's just, they just don't have the possession of the firearm. They also has been known to as well.
My puppy down.
They're also been known to as individuals who go to gun ranges and commit suicide in gun ranges. That has been also been shown to as well. So for especially gun shops, and especially firearm ranges, I think that's something they should see and notice to themselves, because that has been noted that some people have went to gun ranges to commit suicide. So we ask gun ranges to make sure they checking on that too as well, because that has happened according to CDC.
So if we kind of back up to your life growing up, you grew up in Aurora, Illinois?
Yes, I grew up in Aurora.
If you think back over your lifetime, how do you think your life circumstances and experiences and history led you into wanting to be involved in the community in this way of identifying public health issues and trying to come up with solutions to help people. What motivated you to be this way?
My growing up has been very, I say, interesting because I grew up in the 80s where there was the time of the crack epidemic. I grew up in a very terrible neighborhood. I remember being in 7th grade, walking out and getting a gun pointed at me. And we're understanding that the significance, not only how that impacted my life, but it also impacted my mom's life and how she dealt with a lot of things. And since, we're talking about the 80s and during the crack epidemic, most parents that were single home usually became affected by that. So my household was affected by that for a long time. And just seeing some of my friends die over the time and just talking to some of my friends that is now still incarcerated, the change in need of that was something I thought was great to have and be able to organize our organization, move into that public safety part. That's why we striving more to be a part of that public safety and know that those things can make a difference in a child's or an adult's life.
When you recall that event when you were in 7th grade and someone pointed a gun at you, can you still feel it in your body?
Yeah, I remember that day like it was yesterday, actually. And to be honest with you, it was one of our neighbors who just moved in, friends, and they pulled down an Astro van and they just came and unfortunately it would never be an experience that I never forget. I could say that.
In that moment, did you have the fleeting thought or the whole body experience of I might die?
The experience was just don't move. I just said, man, I'm in 7th grade. I don't have nothing to do with the neighborhood I lived in and what was going on around then. And it was just, please don't shoot me in front of my grandma's house. Yeah. And luckily, he didn't, and that was fortunate. That's why I'm still here too as well. So
you noticed yourself kind of freeze, which is a natural instinct to being in the face of a threat or violence, and to maybe communicate, to say, hey man, I don't have anything to do with this neighborhood. I'm in 7th grade. Know me, see me, look at me like I'm a kid. And he made a different choice that day. But it may have changed your sense of safety in the world. It may have changed how your grandma or your mom parented you. What shifted in you that day? Did it change, like how safe you felt in the world?
To talk about safety, yeah. I mean, eventually after a while, even through my freshman year, through my senior year, we was always getting chased and shot at. So eventually, as people may not think, but eventually you're going to try to protect yourself. And that led me to carry a weapon myself because, it's only so many times in your lifetime that you want to be shot at. I mean, I lived in a war zone to be actually. Even living in Aurora, we was ranked #1 homicide for a couple of years. We outbeat Chicago.
In Aurora, Illinois?
In Aurora, Illinois. We in the 90s and the early 2000s, they canceled Halloween so many times because gangs would say, whoever we see out there today, we're going to kill. So, I mean, you just think about a kid getting ready for Halloween and all of a sudden you can't go to Halloween because the city have canceled it just because they have received multiple threats that there was going to be a lot of homicide that night.
Wow. Yeah. So I think what you said is so interesting. I skipped my podcast last week and I did record this whole episode about internal family systems, and then I scrapped it because it was like, this doesn't make any sense. But it is about parts of us that develop. We all have parts of us. Like there's a part of me that wants to speak up, and there's a part of me that wants to stay silent, for example. But the idea is that when we encounter really difficult moments in life, new parts can emerge. And so you had this encounter with violence. You rationalized with the person. You had an inner communicator that came up to keep you safe, a part that stayed frozen. But then as you continued to live in a violent environment or an environment with guns and threats, and a part of you was like, I need to protect myself, and I am going to get my own gun so that if I'm faced with this threat, I'll have a way to, I won't be in the position of being a victim, I will be in a position of strength. And guns kind of change, like words don't matter, communication doesn't matter. When someone has a gun, it's like, how do I defend against a gun? My words might not be sufficient. And so what was that like? How old were you when you started carrying a gun?
I was probably like 13. I think when after my freshman year, I've been shot at so many times after that. I think it was just when me and one of my friends, we got jumped, and I think it was just, because we just lived in the neighborhood, and that's an unfortunate circumstances that still happen today in some crime neighborhoods. Because where you live, they think that's who you are, and unfortunately, after a while, I reference into a saying of eventually, if a dog can be very scared and you keep backing into a corner, and eventually it will bite you because it's fears for its life. And I think that's what we see today, still today, is people are fearful for their life, so they decided to carry a gun to defend themselves just in case they don't want to be a victim. People think that kids now, the youth out there, don't want to live, but they do want to live. This is why they're carrying a gun, to make sure they can still live. And it's not even a good way to live, because if you don't have stability, well, then safety is next. So there's no safety and there's no comfort. And we also know that with no comfort, no safety, no stability, no way to express your words, becomes frustration, no empathy, so you don't feel sorry for no one else. So you just keep piling these things on individuals, no matter what race they are. You're eventually going to have, I say it's like boiling spaghetti pasta. Eventually the spaghetti pasta will come out because it's just so much time being boiled. And I think that's what we need to realize. And how can we reduce that boiling pasta, that really to explode and go over the top, is what our organization is trying to do, is trying to find the root causes. And there is a lot of root causes. We also know with living in poverty comes crime. And if we don't solve the poverty problem, we're going to still have the crime problem.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that stuck out to me is that as a young person, you were maybe profiled not only by a police officer who was driving by, but by a peer. That you said that, like, people don't see you, so they're going to see you as a part of something that they need to defend against, but from all sides, like, it's coming at you. Like, people are not going to see my humanity. They're going to see me as in a group, or, if you were just walking down the street by yourself, you're getting it from all over, like how people view me in the society, including someone in your own neighborhood, that you could be a threat, that you could be a danger. Is that fair to say that you felt that from everywhere?
Yeah, even school. I remember being in a sophomore in high school. We were sitting in the hallway, and the teacher said, "You guys are a waste of taxpayer money." So you're getting it from schools, you're getting it from your neighborhood. Your home environment is not as stable and stability as, like I just talked about, because without that stability, you don't have safety. And then you got to worry about your peers, yourself, that you got to deal with. But then you're worrying about the police who's policing as well. And if they feel like there's already a crime area, you don't even see who that individual is. You're just stuck into this whole category. And then eventually you just feel like you are that category. I think we also need to get out, how can we figure out to get people out of those categories and feel like they are more than just what they are being told.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing that our organizations like to do, is like to go around and tell people you more than what you've been told or the environment you in. Because if we stick to that environment, we're still going to have the same issues. And I think that's the same thing we're seeing across, not just here in Rock Island, Quad Cities, Illinois, Iowa, but across the United States, is we're still having that same issue. And if we continue to have that same issue, well, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, and it's such a paradox, because what I hear or would have seen is a 13-year-old child who deeply wants a sense of safety and stability, that more than anything, your system was like, I need to be safe. I have to keep myself safe. I want to survive. I want to live. And then having to, with your 13-year-old brain, come up with a way to keep yourself safe. And if everyone else is carrying a gun, then you have to carry a gun. And Yeah. So do you still carry a gun?
No, I don't. I don't carry a gun. I just think, is there time to protect my home? Yes. But I also think sometimes people who carry guns may be upset for that moment and have an impulsive decision where they kind of regret some things in their life. We're just talking about road rage, right? Road rage has been increasingly over the years with gun violence. And it's because that in that moment, you're so angry and your impulsiveness, I think if you're going to carry a gun or conceal it or whatever you choose to do on outside in the public, you should also think, my first reaction shouldn't just pull out my gun and shoot. It should be, even though I am angry, how can I control that anger so I don't have a family member grieving because of the loss of my quick impulse actions?
Yeah. In this parts system stuff that I do, something like rage or even the thought of wanting to hurt yourself, those are both called firefighters. And so they're parts of us that are there to protect us. They're there to stop whatever feeling has come up from being there. So if you have terror, if you have a feeling of worthlessness, if you have a feeling of deep loneliness and it pops through the surface, something like suicidal ideation or like I'm going to rage on my partner, I'm going to rage on someone on the road, it actually is your system trying to stop you from feeling the primary emotion, which might be powerlessness. Like that feeling might be so overwhelming that then people will engage in this rage behavior. And what I see you recognizing is the importance of pausing, like acknowledging, like I am filled with rage right now. Can I be with it for 10 seconds, 5 minutes, 24 hours, and see what I feel like when it passes? Instead of that extreme part being like, I cannot handle this feeling of powerlessness, or I can't handle this feeling of despair, and so I need to do something to make it go away right now.
Yeah, and
does that make sense?
It does make sense, and that happens a lot, and you got to think, how was that person brought up too as well? If he grew up in a household that portrayed violence all the time, well, his portrayal when he gets angry of that feeling is to portray violence. Mm-hmm. If he grew up in a household where the parent may be so depressed and that's how she expressed that way of drinking and just internalizing it all, then most likely that child have seen that, and that child, he or she, eventually they'll get an adult, and that's how they internalize it. If you don't have someone that can guide someone with communication skills and learn how to embrace it, well, we just have children that still become adults that don't know how to release that frustration. And if they was only showed violence, well, they're going to release that in violence. It takes a lot to try to distinguish from childhood to adulthood.
Yeah, we don't like pass a test or go through some sort of ritual where it's like, now you're a grown up and you should know these things. We're all still kids in some ways trying to figure out how to do this thing called life. And I think what you're pointing out is, depending on what was modeled for us from our parents, but increasingly for kids from who we watch online, from how our politicians speak to each other, we're learning like, this is how you keep yourself safe. This is how you survive. This is what you should do. Yeah, that's really, we're all modeling something.
Yeah, and we are, and role models are extremely well. If you only go outside, in my point of view, growing up, only people I seen outside there weren't lawyers and doctors in my neighborhoods. There were drug dealers and among other things. So it also depends on what you see, and then what is being seen in TV, what is being seen in books. If you only see certain things in books, then you feel like this is what it is, and this is what I got us to be, or, it's just, I think as we evolving, we should learn how to see a bigger picture. It was just the issue here. There has been with Rock Island with the corn. That's a culture issue, and I don't think we should address a culture issue because we all individually have different cultures, no matter what we are or who we are. We're built by a culture. And I think to take some culture away from someone is like someone coming to me and trying to take something that's culturally that meaning to me away. Unfortunately, it will bother me because I feel like you're just being only biased towards my culture. And I think that's something we should realize, that we're all people. We all have different cultures. And in order to us to sustain a life that we all want and for our children, it is safety. We all want to be safe. I don't think no one in this world, you ask anyone, do you want to be safe or not? I don't think they'll say, no, I don't want to be safe. So I think we should think about that as we all want to be safe. How can we do our part to make everyone safe in our area?
I really love that safety is this great unifier for like all people, that we are all programmed in some way to survive and to be safe and secure. That is probably pretty universal. I mean, maybe not completely universal, but
I think it is. I mean, no matter if you went to a different country, you ask them, what you rather be safe or not safe? Again, they're going to say, I'd rather be safe, because without stability, if you don't have stability, and part of that stability is safety.
Right.
And if you don't have that, well, eventually, you become a product of your unsafe environment. And there's no way you can change that. I mean, does a lot of people might make it out? True, yes. But is it a high number of statistics? No. No matter if you in a high-rise building or if you live in a poor area that's in a trailer park, it doesn't distinguish what it is. If it's poverty and unsafe, you're going to grow up unsafe, and you're going to become an adult that don't know how to deal with those emotions because you never had someone to explain or give you the ability to express your emotions, because some households is do what I say, close your mouth, you don't talk back, you don't express your feelings. Well, if you've been told that as a kid, no matter who you are, not to express your feelings, how can you know how to express that feeling as an adult?
When I was talking to Demetrius last week, he said that one of the reasons he worries about his son, for example, is that these kids don't quite know how to communicate. They're not sure how to communicate. And so she wants the camera. So if they don't know how to communicate, how do they, with their little brains, I don't mean that in a mean way, but when you're 13, like your brain's not fully developed, your emotional regulation is less than an adult. You're still learning how to communicate and how to be, and then you're confronted with an adult who wants you to do something, and that communication piece is like not there. I make my kids try to go to counters or make phone calls, and it's really hard for them. My kid will like call me, and then she'll sit silently on the phone, and my husband and I just laugh about it, because these kids, we're like, when you call me and I say hello, you have to say hello. Like you don't, whether it's something simple around communication or if it's a really high stakes situation needing to communicate. I think you're right. We struggle with it.
Yeah, and you got to think of, okay, a 13-year-old, he's just he or she is trying to develop who they are since as a person, where they fit in this world. And if you no communication skills, that is bad, because what happens if they do run into an issue where they need to communicate, but their communication is only violence. So then you have them communication through violence. And that's what we see a lot today. How do they communicate? Why they're communicating? And I think they only know way to communicate is what they see, what they've been taught, what they see in their household. Mm-hmm. And those communication skills, if they're not there because they can't speak or speak, then you're going to have the issues we're having. And that is, the youth trying to figure out who they are in this world.
So who do you think is an example of a good communicator? Like, do you see that in the community at the national level? Can you think of when we're trying to look out and be like, who can show me how to communicate? Does anybody come to mind?
I mean, it depends on what communication you're looking for. I think we all have this part where we seek communication and how we want to internalize communication and what do we really want to hear. I think we need to find the audience that is not just trying to portray violence or division, someone that is trying to bring togetherness. And I spoke with Mayor Ashley, and what a great guy. I mean, he's trying to not only do for the city of Rock Island, but his vision as the city of Rock Island as a whole, not separating between up the hill or down the hill, West End, North End, South End, but what is it can we do together as a city as a whole? I think individuals like that shows it's highly how things can be done and working together, because eventually all together we all want to be safe. We want all our kids to enjoy education. No matter if it's private or public, a child should deserve education. And I think we just need to look for that person who is trying to bring togetherness instead of division.
Well, I feel like that is America is this great experiment that can we live in this nation where some people want to be able to grow corn on their property and some people don't. You know, some people, all these different cultures, all these different ideas about how the world should be, all these different worldviews, and there's so many different ones. And that is the great experiment of America, and why we are a really cool country is that we're still working to kind of figure that out. Is it possible? Do you think it's possible?
I do believe it's possible. I believe we're all looking for the same thing, that is safety. And if we realize and internalize, hey, what we all really want, safety, okay, I think this is what we should really focus on is being safe. I mean, everyone wants to walk out their house not worrying about anything. They want to know when they leave their house, they're going to be able to return to their house. And this is why, again, our organization focuses on road and public safety, because we know on the road safety side, there's a lot of tragic traffic deaths. And we want to make sure that person come back home too, because again, growing up without a mother or a father, or losing that mother or father at a young age, it's like, people may not think it, but it's like throwing a pebble in the water, and you might not think nothing of it, but it takes all those little ripples takes an effect. I know this because my father died at the age of 3 when I was 3, so of gun violence. So you got to think he wasn't present through my years of trying to figure out who I was to give me guidance. And when you don't have that, as we keep not being safe, and someone lose their parent, you don't know how that can affect. I think that's what we need to realize and look at. If we take someone's superhero, it's what I call them, because no matter if we have different views of how we think of things, no matter what, someone that loves that person, idolize that person and need that person in their life. And if just because we might disagree doesn't give us the right to take that other person's life, because if we do, then we leave a ripple effect with that child, because now that child has the parent, father or mother. I think that's what we should realize, that would you want to be taken away from your kid at a young age due to any things unsafe? I think that's what we should be thinking about the most.
Are you being that you carried a gun at a young age and do gun safety, how do you feel about the Second Amendment? And obviously it's a constitutional amendment, that right to bear arms, but what do you think about just the proliferation of guns in the United States, and just how much higher gun violence is in our country than any really country in the world? How do you square Second Amendment stuff with the loss of your father, with the destruction of communities, with mass shootings? How does all that settle in you?
I think we do have the right to bear arms, but I think when that Constitution was written, in my opinion, it was the right to bear arms to protect your home. I think now we have gotten to a point where even if I'm on the road, if I don't like what you say, that's my amendment. I can do what I need. I think that's what I think when we first look at firearms, when they was manufactured, even back they've been around since the 1800s. So you got to think most people then carried guns to protect their homes. They carried a shotgun maybe in their pickup truck back then, but it wasn't, no one was carrying assault rifles around like a handgun, and no one was carrying handguns around as much, but they didn't use them just because they felt upset or they didn't like what a person said. I think we should have the right to own a gun. Ownership is something that I think we all should be thinking about, no matter if it's a gun or a home. Mm-hmm. Or I think just the opinion of the Second Amendment is we took it a little bit too far, too extreme. And I think we just need to go right back to what was it meant for. It was meant for us to protect our home.
Yeah. I wonder if the Second Amendment rights impact First Amendment rights. You know, the right to free speech, the right to organizing and protesting. And when those Second Amendment, when people start using guns as a tool of, it's not communication, but as a tool of, I don't like what you're doing or saying, I'm going to stop you. I wonder how it impacts our First Amendment. I had two guests that were kind of scheduled to come on in the last week, and both said, I don't know if now is a time that I want to talk publicly about anything. And so this idea that guns in the ether, guns in the atmosphere, do an effective job at times of silencing people. Like if you and I were in a heated debate right now and you pulled a gun, guarantee you I would shut up.
And you know, I think that's the thing. I think we think, you know, we use our Second Amendment to say, well, it overwrites our First Amendment. And unfortunately, even though we all have different views, some people might have the similar views, some opinions. I don't think we should silence those views. I think we should hear them out. We should listen to them, understand where they coming from. Because again, if I come from an area that has been erupted with gun violence, and you come in an area that never seen gun violence at all or any type of violence, your views are going to be way different than the views I see. And I think to come and sit down and say, hey, well, I understand you're part of your view, but in my eyes, in my view, what I went through, this is the shoes that was given to me and I walked them. And your views, I understand where you're coming from, but also you got to understand my views. I think instead of us using weapons as a silencer, we should use our voices to be heard, understand. And the hardest thing to someone to do is listen, right? Because no one wants to active listen. We listen to respond instead of listen to hear what that person is saying. And I think that's where we're getting an issue too, where people they don't want to respond back to them in a vocal way. They just want to respond back to them in a violent way.
When I was doing my master's program, I got some training in how to do like conversations around diversity. And one of the first things we learned in this training was how to listen. And they taught us this thing that I'll never forget. It was a Chinese symbol. It was called Ting, and it was like a Chinese symbol for listening. And it had these 4 parts, and I'll probably forget them now. But it was this idea that when you listen with your eyes. So you look at the person, you pay attention to their facial expressions, to sadness in their eyes, to their body language. You listen with your brain. So you kind of try to contextualize, where's this person coming from? Where have they been? Like, what are the things going on in the society that might be impacting them? You listen with your ears, so you hear the words that are coming through. And then I think the final one was you listen with your heart. And so you try to seek to understand before you're understood. And that is not how we do communication in our world today.
No, and I think that's a great way of analogy of putting things, right? Because body language is important. How is that person responding to you in a body language way? Is it welcoming body language, or is it fearful body language or standoff? And I think we have to look more than just communication is just more vocal. It's body language, it's eye movement. I think we need to realize and analyze that and try to figure out how can we go back to those. And somehow we lost our way, and it became, I don't like what you say. It's either be quiet or I make you be quiet. And that's a terrible way to keep going, because I reference to
That's so cute. So just for the listener, obviously your daughter's here. And I invited her to come lay down by me on this couch with a pillow because I think she's getting sleepy. And she grabbed the pillow and walked over to you and is like, I think I could fall asleep. I think.
Yeah, but again, that's that safety part, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about safety. Imagine as a kid, if she didn't feel safe, which way would she came and took a pillow and come lay down? Mm-hmm. If that child doesn't feel safe as they're developing their brain, the psychologists know 3 to 4 is a crucial age of developing safety and communication skills. Mm-hmm. And if that 3 or 4 year old gets skipped that, then again we're talking about communication. How is that kid going to feel safe?
Yeah.
How is it going to portray safety? And I think that's where we got to get back of thinking about the generation and youth, because if we don't continue to think about that, then eventually, I like the Remember of the Titans movie, and the Remember of Titan movie is the
She's got a what is that called again?
tape measure.
Tape measure. She's got a tape measure. It's the hot toy in the studio.
And I say if the part of me of the Remember Titans movie is when they woke up in practice field and went to go look at the Battle of Gettysburg, when he talked about we're still fighting the same fight. If we continue to same fight that we've been fighting for since the 1800s, we're still going to fall victim to what they fell victim to of. And I think somehow we're going to have to figure out how we can come together instead of falling back to the same ideology from the 1800s. I think we should learn from our past to correct our future. Mm-hmm. And if we don't do that and we feel like there's never been nothing wrong with the past, then we will never correct the future. And I think that's what we're seeing now. No one thinks there's nothing wrong with the past. There's a lot of things that's been wrong with the past. A lot of things that's been happening that we should be able to say, okay, how can we move forward to make our country safe?
Yeah.
That should be our number one priority. What can we do to make safety? Not my views of safety, not your views of safety, but what do the people want? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we got to go back to. What does the people need to feel safe? And what does not just one person wants as safety, but what it does mean safety as a whole. And I think that's what we need to go back to.
What do you think safety means? I wrote this little article on my website that they're so dorky, nobody reads them, but it's about, I've talked about this guy, Rawls, like several times on the podcast, and he talks about taking an original position. And what that means is you figure out the way you feel about something like safety before you know who you're going to be in the society. So you don't know if you'll be rich or poor, black or white, this religion or that religion. You just don't know anything about who you are going to be inside of a society. And then behind what he calls that veil of ignorance, so you're blind to it. It's kind of how our justice system is supposed to be. You would figure out the system that you think you could live with no matter who you showed up as in the world. And so when you think about what keeps people safe and keeps all people safe, what comes to mind? How do we create that safety and security?
And treat people like people. I think that's what we have stopped treating people like a person. And Dr. Seuss says a person's a person, no matter how big or small he or she is. And I think that's what we got to get back to. We got to understand people are a person. So for me, we have to go back and think, that's a person. Mm-hmm. I'm a person. As a person, safety should be no matter who I am, where I am, I should feel safe. Even to have my kids somewhere, I should feel safe. If I go out the store, I should feel safe. I shouldn't be judged what I am or who I am, because at the end of the day, I'm a person. So I think my person of safety is treating a person like a person. And then once we start doing that, we can put the safety back into our country, to the world, because no matter what he or we think, we're still a person. We've been created life. We given life, no matter how you view your point of views of how life is given, what was your views on religion. At the end of the day, we're all a person, and we should be treated like a person. And I think that's what happened in the 60s when we came back with desegregation. We was treating a person like a person, and we still don't even treat people like a person. I think we got to go back to treating a person like a person.
Yeah. So, and you talked about this experience growing up where sometimes you were treated like a threat instead of a person. And that in our culture today, we tend to like view our people as people and other people as threats. So even just the rhetoric going on right now, like it's almost like we're on sports teams, and it's like if you're a Bears fan, then we're cool. But if you're a Packers fan, we're going to have problems, or I view you as an adversary. So I feel like that mentality or that mindset, this is the big task for America. And why I love Rock Island is because we are this microcosm of the United States. Like I've said this before too, if Chicago is if Illinois is the most American state broken down by different groups, Rock Island, its diversity, its richness of culture, its difference in ideology, economics, all the things. I feel like this is the big job of our civilization is, can we treat all people as people?
Yeah, and that's what drew me to Rock Island, because I like a person treating another person like a human being. And how can we help that human being? Like I referenced earlier, if I'm a novice rock climber and we going to go climb a rock and you're just the beginning and I'm climbing the rock, but I'm not lending the hand out to you. And every time I'm just watching you fall without giving you guidance or help, well, that's going to be an issue. And I think that's like Rock Island. You're the beginning. The mayor is the novice rock climber, and he sees the city of Rock Island that needs help, and he wants to help everyone up. And I think that's what brings Rock Island such a diversity. Mm-hmm. And what drew my attention to Rock Island is because I like that. I like my kids to grow up with different cultures and understand different cultures, to respect different cultures. I worked with a bunch of individuals when I worked at a company called Cielo. A lot of my colleagues were from the Philippines, mm-hmm. and then understanding their culture was amazing, to understand certain things they think about. What we might think is, no, we won't do that, but that's their culture. I think to bring and show each other's cultures in a diversity way, in a respectful way, and knowing that, again, they're still a person.
Yeah, I went through like a whole Buddhist phase in my life, the religion Buddhism. And one thing that I've really carried with me, and I'll probably totally botch this, is but like a dual awareness. Like I both recognize that there are contextual, historical, there's all these maybe differences between you and me and how we were raised, what we look like, what our ideologies are. So I can both hold that in my attention. I can appreciate the advantages and disadvantages in the context of how we grew up, and I can contextualize all that. But then I also hold this awareness that we are one, like we are interconnected, and in some place that is beyond what we look like and our human bodies, and that we're the same, that there is no difference between and it could even be with like a tree or a bird or anything, but like that there is an aliveness and a humanity that transcends everything. So, that old idea of color blindness or cultural blindness, where it's like you just treat everyone the same. Yeah, that's still true. And we can carry in this, what is criticized as wokeness, or being aware of how do differences impact people, how do they shape lives, how do they advantage and disadvantage individuals. Like, I feel like we can do both at the same time. So I can both recognize historical and cultural reasons that there is difference in culture or society, and I can deeply connect to the fact that I am you and you are me, and in that way there's no difference. Like, I don't know, does that make sense, or does that sound too woo-woo?
It does make sense. During my ancestry research on my grandfather's side. My grandfather, dad, and mom last name was Deloach. They from Canada. So my grandparents, my great grandparents on my dad's side are half Canadian. I'm actually 14% Irish. If we looking at me, will you think that?
No.
No. I have cousins that is just as skin tone as you are. And when I tell people this is my cousin, they said, no, well, you got to be related through marriage. And I'm like, no, actually we're related through blood. I think we really start to understand that we're still all people, no matter who we are. The only difference between us is my melanin in my skin. That's the only difference. I say that we should recognize that, and somehow we don't. Again, the melanin in our skin and the culture we are, or what culture did you grow up in? If you
and those things that shape us, like if I was walking down the street in Aurora, nobody would view me as a threat, and people will still perhaps view you as a threat sometimes. So it's like those are the differences. Contextually, I have awareness of them, but I can also hold the awareness that, as Thurgood would say, if you cut us, we both bleed red. That in many ways, race is a social construct. It's not real. But then it's very real in the real ways that it impacts people. So it's like you're trying to hold both of those in mind at the same time.
Yeah, and you think about it, does racism exist? Yes. It should exist. In my opinion, no, because we're all a person. No matter if you stop breathing and I gave you CPR, you're going to respond just as well as I'm going to respond to CPR. Doesn't matter what color we are, what we are. The only difference is between our anatomy when it comes to CPR and how it is just performed versus a man and a woman. Can you give me CPR with my shirt still on? Yeah. Can I give you CPR properly with your shirt on? No. I think that's the only difference we see, and I think that's where we got to get back to, is saying we're all a person underneath.
I don't even know, because I'm a woman, you can't give me CPR with my shirt on?
No, no, you cannot.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, to talk about safety, right?
Not to get us off topic, but.
and talk about safety, right? And CPR, right? And most women die because nobody wants to perform CPR because no one wants to take that woman's shirt off.
Is that because of a bra that's in the way?
Because your bra and your breast, and no one wants to take it off or do that because they feel like so women die of more respiratory. Not receiving CPR because of that reason.
Wow.
I think
so the CPR is not as effective because you would need your breast to go to the side so that you could really access the chest. And if you're wearing a bra that's interfering with that or keeping something between you and the heart, then the CPR is not as effective.
No.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that, and that's the only difference between male and female when you're giving CPR. That's like the reference. There's only certain things is our anatomy that kind of separate us from who we are, and I think that's where we get back at saying we're all still a person. Mm-hmm. It's just our anatomy that changes, and then our melanin in our skin. You can still be Caucasian and still have more melanin in your skin than the other person that might be Caucasian, is because somewhere in your history, your DNA, your family member might had a different ethnic or race they can be a part of that makes their skin tone different. I think that's the only difference that I say we are, and we got to go back to treating people like a person to become safer in this world.
Yeah, and the ancestry stuff is so interesting because you can find out, like my dad always told us that we were like Dutch or something, but we're not. That side of the family is actually like Mediterranean, like I don't know, and it's nothing we ever really heard about growing up or knew about, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's a part of my identity. And my grandma always said that our Scandinavian heritage, that some of our people related to her were Sami, which is like indigenous people who lived in the far north Scandinavian but and it matters and it doesn't matter. It's like,
Yeah, and you think about it, I think we were voyagers before we started to really colonize certain areas in this world. And I think when we was voyagers, we went everywhere. And you think if I'm a voyager and I come to a land that's skin tone may be different, was it that, oh, you can't really talk to that person or date that person because of that? It wasn't. I don't believe it was like that. And this is why when you do your ancestry, you really go back to your 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 12th grandparents, and you be like, wait a second, my 12th grandparent was this? How?
Yeah.
And why no one talked about it? I think we once we start to find out who we are and realize, wait, my grandparents was voyagers somehow, because how did they end up intertwined with this indigenous?
If you look at like Vikings, which I have probably for sure, I think I'm like 80% Scandinavian. So I have ancestors who would have probably been Vikings, which meant there was probably violence and taking. And I love Frozen 2 because it kind of deals with that idea of knowing that maybe an ancestor did something. But we probably all have ancestors who were violent and tribal and territorial, and I think it's okay. Like, it's not, I'm not excusing it, but I'm saying I can be with the pain of my own history, whether it's my personal history as an individual, the history of my city, the history of my culture and this bigger place, in the world. I don't need to be so overwhelmed by it that I either try to pretend it didn't exist or it's not there, or celebrate it in some way that overlooks the hard parts of it. Like, I have hard stuff in my own past, and if I can't look at it, I'm at risk of repeating. And so I'm talking about my own personal choices and my own personal behaviors. Like, in my own history of my short 45-year-old life, there's stuff there that if it overwhelms me so much to look at truth of my being, I almost consider myself to be in danger of a repeat of history. And it doesn't mean that I'm a horrible, awful, bad person. It means that in the course of being a human, mistakes have been made. And the best thing to do is look at those head on and to integrate them into my system and to say, how do I want to live going forward? And then to try to hold on to that with the decisions I make going forward. And maybe I have to make some amends and like repair some harm that was done. And I'm talking about my own life. But you could extend that out to like civilization, cultures. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it does, right? Because you think about it, we all reflect and we all have our past. We all have a book of our own story, and we are the author of that. And some of our stories may not have been also great. And understanding and acknowledging that this part of this chapters was not so great. How can I move forward to create a better chapter for myself and for the world? I made a shirt that says, life isn't just about you. And then on the back I put, it's common courtesy that we leave this generation better off than we found it.
Yeah.
As a human, as we start to age, we got to put a sense of that. Do we want to keep seeing the same repetitive cycle of generations and generations being lost? Don't show love or compassion for one another. I think that's where we got to get back at, and we start to look at ourselves. And then when we start to reflect on ourselves and what we came through, we kind of say, okay, how can I be that voice to help? Again, because anyone can be a rock climber. Anyone can assist. And I think that's what we should all do as people is help to assist and bring that togetherness in.
Do you want to talk about Charlie Kirk?
We can.
We don't have to.
We can.
It's just out there,
You know what happened?
And it involves all these things: safety, guns, identity, people hurting, being hurt, and it's probably a reason some people haven't wanted to.
Everyone's nervous, right? Because, no matter what your views or your opinion is or what you feel, again, we all have different opinions. We all have different voices. We all have different views. But again, when you take that ability for that child to still have that present parent, it causes a ripple effect. And I think that's, again, we got to talk about what would we want one of our kids to grow up without one of us? Mm-hmm. And if your answer is no, I don't want my kid to grow up with, especially when they're young. You know, you think about it, when they get older, they safety, secure, they're adult. You know, is that worry going to be as high as it is if they're young? No.
Yeah.
I mean, so we got to think about it as that, and I think about that, and just it's everyone's so scared to say what they really feel, because either they're going to feel they're being ridiculed, they're going to get blasted on social media for being fashionism, racism, or a left wing or right wing. Again, no matter if you're left, right, still we're all a person. We're all people, and if we don't realize that as part we people, and it got to go back to the people, and all of our historic or great leaders, the word they use mostly is people. I mean, you don't see nothing else but people. You talk about from no matter where you talk about John Lennon. He talked about the people and what his stance was for the people. Mm-hmm. We talk about JFK. He talked about the people. We talk about Martin Luther King. He talked about the people. Mm-hmm. You talk about Malcolm X. He talked about being more for Black people to take accountability for themselves, to help other Black people not become victims or betray they are a victim. And then you talk about Fred Hampton. He was really concerned about the people. You know, everyone think he was about hating a certain group, but his idea was we're all people. We got to come together as people. And all our great leaders all talk about people. How can we become a better society as people? Yep, your views are different, my views are different, but how can we come together as people? And I think a lot of people are scared to talk about that because of what's again, I can silence you with a gun more than I can silence you with sitting down, having a conversation with you, understanding your opinion, and say, okay, and then come with an agreement and saying, that's your opinion, my opinion. How can we put both our opinions together to do one thing only that everyone's talking about is making safe. And being people.
Yeah, and I think one of my coping strategies in life is to like intellectualize and kind of think about like theory. Like, what is a underlying principle or theory, or how should I think about this? And so your initial statements, what I heard you doing is that Rawlsian thing of my original position is that I don't want a 3-year-old to lose their dad. That you know intimately what that feels like. You talked about the ripple effect of that, that a person should not lose their life for speaking their opinions. And so if we're behind the veil of ignorance and we don't know yet who got hurt, who was harmed, it might feel very clear in our system that like, I don't want that type of violence in my society. And that's kind of what I hear you reflecting is, I heard someone say that like the way our system works right now is we hear someone got harmed and we start to think, well, are they on my team or another team? Let me figure that out first before I figure out how I feel about it. And that you're flipping that. You're kind of saying, I want to more understand what actions are okay and not okay, and then I can find out the information about who's the victim, who's the perpetrator, like universally calling things wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah, should someone lose their life for speaking someone? No. Should someone go to prison because for the rest of their life to be a political person because they're speaking about their views of how they feel about political? No. Because again, we keep silencing people that can see and understand that, hey, look, there's something wrong here, and this is about the people, and we should fix this because look at what the ripple effect that we're having with the people. We have suicide being on the high rise. We have drug use has become worse than the crack epidemic. We know that methamphetamine and all those drugs are on the rise more than the crack epidemic. Mm-hmm. And we continue to allow people to not be safe and view as a person, and we keep just going back to it's not my problem.
This might be a controversial take that'll get me in trouble, but the way I operate, like I could watch something on the internet about a mother in Gaza, and I literally will start crying because I can imagine that being my child, and I can feel in my own body like, what would I do and how would I keep my kids safe? And like there would be nowhere to go. You can't leave. You can't get out of the country, but you can't stay. And so I can watch something like that online and like I'll be crying. I can watch I just heard a story that maybe, we don't know all the facts, but someone may have been lynched down south. A young black man may have been lynched this week, and I can feel it in my body. I can feel it. And when the stuff with Charlie Kirk happened, I feel that too. So I kind of feel like empathy. I mean, I just have a lot of empathy. So when I see people suffering, I feel it. And I'm wondering if, and this could be totally wrong, but I'm wondering if part of this phenomenon with his passing, when we've had all these other people die and pass away of political violence and other types of violence around the country, around the world, is that this big group that is very vocal is feeling their empathy for someone that they don't necessarily always feel for a wide swath of the population. So in this grief, in this moment of what looks like a lot of grief, the flags are at half staff. There are, it's a big moment of grief, and we don't get to choose how our grief shows up. So, but I'm just wondering if it feels bigger in the culture, in the big culture, because a lot of people who maybe don't feel empathy for big parts of the population are feeling a lot of empathy right now that they're not maybe used to. Because I feel like I get myself in trouble on the far left, even because I do have empathy. Like I could even get into it over someone who's like, how can you have empathy for someone who didn't have empathy for me? Whether that is someone who's feeling like this figure never had empathy for me. How can you have empathy for them? And it's like, because I don't choose my heart. Like it just is sad about a lot of things in the world. It gets sad about violence. It gets sad about hunger. It gets sad about poverty. It feels the stuff. And I can't control that. But I think this big cultural moment is like a lot of people are feeling empathy for a human, but I feel like normally they might not feel that for a trans person who dies or a kid who's a victim of gun violence in a community. Like I feel like there are people who can only really muster empathy for people who are like themselves. And then there are people who can feel empathy for everyone. Does that make sense? And I feel like that's a more commonality. Like I have conservative friends who I know feel empathy across the board for things. And it's like, I feel like I kind of have more in common for you, even though we're not on the same quote unquote team, than I do for someone who can turn their empathy on and off depending on who the victim is and who the perpetrator is.
Yeah, and I think instead of us choosing sides, we got to think, no matter what person, who's been victimized, they are a person, and we have became two-sided. Either you this way, and this is your way of thinking, and if that is, then when you're person who thinks the same ideology as you, then I don't have empathy for them. And then the people who feel the same way feel sad. And then if you go against that view, then you're wrong, and you know what, I might cause you some harm. And again, we're all a person. We all have different views, no matter how you think about it. It's like I always reference to being in a relationship, right? People want to be in a relationship, you're in a relationship, but you're still two individuals. Mm-hmm. Again, in this country, we're still different individuals. We're different individuals through culture ways, through a lot of ways, and we're not taking that in. And what we do is, well, if you're not this way, then you're my enemy, and it's turning into, I say, like gang rivals.
Yeah.
Because now it's coming into violence. You got to think, you have two gangs where I'm from. They solve the issues with violence.
And did they even remember what they were fighting about?
Sometimes no. I met a lot of people.
I don't mean to laugh about it, but it's like, what are you fighting with each other about? Like the whole big world and all the injustice, and how did this become about somebody said something bad and I'm going to fight with you? It's like so little in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people who have been working hardly to stop gun violence out in Chicago is starting to tell them and explain that to them. Like, what are you really fighting for? And what are you arguing for? And why are you killing each other for? And people are starting to really understand, like, oh man, I might have more in common with that person than I might not think.
Yep.
And we go off this quick of a glance, like we're looking at a book and saying, no, that's who that person is, without really getting to know that person and understanding. They might have different views, but they might want same thing in common. And I think that's where we got to look at what things we should find in common, what everyone wants. And again, no one in this world wants to be unsafe. I don't want to go nowhere where I feel unsafe.
Yeah.
And we got to realize that just because we have different views, and that there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to remember that those views. I just really think that with different views, we should accept people different views, and say, okay, that's your view. And again, we got to still look at the whole picture, right? We just can't look at parts of the whole picture, especially when it comes to America. This country was built off a lot of bloodshed, and we still going through that same bloodshed. And eventually, if we don't change that, we're going to lose as a people, and there will be no more. Can you go get my phone and go watch Bluey?
Ooh, that sounds. Oh, she's like, yeah, I can always watch Bluey. Bluey, that's a show that teaches emotional intelligence.
Not off topic. I've been watching Bluey since it was only 7 minutes. When it first came out, it was only 7-minute episodes. It was not a 30-minute episode. And then over time, they made them 30 minutes episodes. So
Bluey or Sesame Street, sometimes those TV shows are ways that children learn empathy and communication and.
You go back to Mr. Rogers, right?
Mr. Rogers, yeah.
He spoke many times to congressmen and on the Senate floor about kindness and what it is. There is a reference for me for Tupac. People thought thug life meant criminal ways of activities, but what it actually meant is the hate you give. And I won't say it all, F little infants. And that is true. If you give hate to a little infant, what happens to that infant over time? You keep showing hate to. Well, that infant's going to have hate. We're talking in just the reference about wars in different countries. If I live in a different country and one person is always portraying hate and violence towards me, is it most likely that I'm going to like that person? No. Why would I like that person if they continue to still hate and violence and destruction? I think that's where we talk about, like, we got to give back that love to the infants and the youth.
Yeah.
So eventually those youths and children don't become adults to say, well, all the thing I know is hatred and violence, so that's all I'm going to see is hatred and violence.
And there is so much in our history specifically. Like, the United States was the only system that had, you were a slave your whole life and your children became slaves, different than in other countries on other continents. I am super sad about Charlie Kirk's murder, and I feel for his children and I have empathy for him. But I think that he would encourage that a conversation around root causes and politics, and that's what he championed. And so as I've familiarized myself with him watching all these clips, he would have argued that, okay, there's nothing you can't do in this country as a black man that I can't do. That was one of his things, was almost that the problems within the black community are, in the year 2025, the sole responsibility and problem of the black community. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think that's true. And that's what like I said, I've been working with a lot of groups in and around Chicago and throughout the state of Illinois. And a lot of them are starting to understand that in order for black communities to become thriving is in that black community, that we have to start picking ourselves up. I mean, we just think about.
And I totally, again, it's like that dual reality. Like, sure, that is 100% true. And in our own lives, we only have control over ourselves. And in the time and space we're dropped into in the universe, we have to, be accountable to ourselves. And true. And, if I ever could have debated Charlie Kirk, which I can't, but it's this idea that systemic racism and the legacy of oppression does exist. And I know that right now that's not popular. That can get you in trouble for saying they're dismantling DEI programs. The new administration wants to pretend they're doing a tactic that someone in a relationship would do, where they label you to silence you. Like let's say we're married and I have some legitimate complaints about things going on in our marriage, and I come to you and I say, this really hurts me, this bothers me. And you say, you are a nag. That word is used to silence people in a relationship. Stop nagging me. Stop blowing. All of a sudden, like, you have a problem, like, I'm going to label you as a way to make you feel like you're weird for having a problem, and I'm going to shut you down in that way. And so using a term, for someone like me and saying, like, that's woke ideology. Shut up. Sorry. Oh, do you have that lid in your mouth? I don't want you to choke. I just said that, and I'm like, I don't want you to think I'm saying shut up to you. I'm just talking for the podcast. But if someone like me starts to say something like, yes, every person in America needs to be responsible in some part for their own life circumstances, sure. However, we have a legacy of both burdens and gifts. And so for someone like Charlie Kirk to say to a young black man in a studio, what can I do that you can't do? And to act like there's just this great equality that exists in the United States and there's no legacy, I feel like is false. So if you think about chattel slavery in the United States, and for a long time people not being allowed to read, men and women being separated from each other, families being pulled apart, people being beaten as a way of being controlled, masters beating slaves, and then parents parenting with that authoritative kind of approach toward their own children. Like, these are legacies. And in the meantime, other parts of the society were building wealth, getting land ownership, being educated, reading books. I mean, so there is this difference. And the one thing I would say for anyone who thinks that we live in a meritocracy where the only thing that matters is your skills and abilities and work ethic, I don't think that's true. And if we believe that is true, then I would highly encourage our system to think about, okay, well then when everyone dies, you take all the things that they've accumulated and you turn them back to the whole. You make them communal. Because if there is nothing inherently advantageous about historical ability to get ahead, if the argument from somebody like Charlie Kirk or people, whether it's Ben Shapiro or somebody I debated from high school on the internet 5 years ago, if there's nothing inherently advantageous for certain groups in our society about the way that we're set up, then when people die, they should turn it all back to the common pot. And if they're like, no, I can't do that, why not? You'll be dead. Because my children will be deeply devastated by not inheriting from me the gifts I've received from this society. Then you don't believe in a meritocracy. Because in a meritocracy, your kids could start out with nothing really. And based on their hard work and their mental faculties, and they would be fine. So yeah, I just think this idea that we are all created equal, but there is also inequality, and I will not be silenced for fear of someone saying like I'm woke. I don't. It's like telling a woman who's like, I don't like it when you hurt me in this way. You're a neg.
Yeah, and well, let's talk about it, right? And you got to think, how can a race progress when it wasn't able to progress? And what happened is, when we're talking about 1960s. We're not that far. 1965, when two black people was arrested in Texas for owning banks, and they actually went to prison for it. We're talking about 1965. We're not talking about 1800s. We're talking about 1965. Mm-hmm. And then you fast forward 20 years later, we have the crack epidemic. Well, during those time from 1965, you couldn't progress, right? Because we just talked about, there was the civil rights movement in the 60s, and then we talk about riots, and after that, and you can't progress. And when you can't have a race advance, well, you're going to see what we have now, which is also seen on TV and portrayed, that most black people are violent. Mm-hmm. Well, when you have not had a race to progress, and you try to say, well, there's no difference. Well, there's been a difference. I think, again, that's where we got to come back and saying, okay, this is our story. We have to embrace it. But to act like it never exists will show that we'll never progress. Yeah. That just go to anything in life. If you never say you have a problem, but you know that there is a problem, and you keep saying no, there's no problem, well, the problem is still going to exist. Yeah. And in 1965, that problem that people couldn't advance was actually a hinder. And then we fast forward 20 years later, where, again, the crack epidemic hit predominantly black neighborhoods and poverty communities. And it was known that the CIA was putting those products there. How can you advance? Again, we talk about advancing a race. Well, then they only seen the advancement in selling drugs. Mm-hmm. Well, then we have the Reagan area where the war on drugs, and then it became where it just became more police brutality heavens and presence in the community, more targeting, mm-hmm. and then you didn't advance then. So when you're trying to talk about advancing a race, you have put so many roadblocks and obstacles. Well, this is the problem we're going to have. Mm-hmm. And then you talk about education, where some cities, no matter where you are, and this is just poverty level. It has nothing to do with color, because there's a boundary now. I feel like more. Is it a lot of color boundaries? A little, but is it a more economics division than anything? Because if in a poverty community, my school is going to be not as great. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have high crime. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have drug use, no matter, and I'm going to have drug sales. Those things that are now is the driven thing when it comes to is the economic. And if you're not on a certain part of the economics, well, you're struggling. Mm-hmm. And everyone's going to feed their kid. If your kid's 2 years old or how old, and the kids keep screaming because they're hungry, well, no matter, eventually you're going to do as a human being, as our DNA and what we programmed to before we was even born, it's going to act. You're going to say, well, my kid's going to eat. Either way, one way or another, I'm going to give my kid some food. And I think that's where we start to really see the economic side of what's portraying now that been happening in history.
Yeah. Yeah, and so when you create conditions in an economy where a percentage of the population lives in a state of desperation, and then that percentage of the population does things in the society that are illegal or socially unacceptable in the pursuit of survival and of advancement and all the things we want as humans, And then you can kind of crack down on that segment of the society. And there are like industries, when I was learning about poverty in college and in my master's program, this idea that there is a functionality of that type of poverty and that industries can be built up around those conditions. So then you need people to police that population. You need facilities built to house that population. Those facilities need toilet paper and concrete poured. And, so it's really complicated. It's really complicated. And this is going to sound so conspiratorial. So if I'm going too far out there for you, Antaeus, you just let me know. But the play of the powerful is to say, and the reason that all of this exists is because of you. So if you're someone living in poverty, it's because you are essentially flawed. Like the reason that this whole thing, like why you're struggling, why you can't get ahead, it's because you're deficient and defective. Meanwhile, the people with the most are getting more and more and more. And so the storyline of it, the functionality of that type of poverty, I don't know, it's a big problem. And it's like people who are stressed and she ready to fall asleep?
Yeah, and
I mean, for example, like if you were really wealthy, you'd have a nanny that would take care of your baby while you try to do social justice work. Like you know.
Well, you think about it. Here in Rock Island, and they spent $27 million on the new jail. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens if we put that $27 million, even $20 million,
thank you, boo,
into a poor, predominantly poverty area? Mm-hmm. Well, you just solved the problem. Mm-hmm. You have gave those individuals resources and tools financially to be able to get themselves out of poverty.
Yeah.
And when you continue to what you want to spend your money on, if you're spending $27 million on incarcerating someone, and let's just talk about America, we incarcerate more individuals than any other country in the world. Mm-hmm. We're last in education.
In our budget, the big beautiful bill, the priorities for our budgeting right now are heavy on policing, facilities for policing, security, protection against violence. We're heavy on that type of funding while we're cutting services to the most vulnerable among us. And so we're beefing up like state of policing while we're making the people who are hurting the most more vulnerable and therefore more desperate. And like, what's the point of that? I mean, and if you think in these terms of functionality of she's probably like, when is this woman gonna stop talking? Do you sing to her? How do you normally get her to go to sleep?
By patting the booty. She likes the motion, I guess. Mm-hmm. It's just like a car ride, right? You get a kid get in the car and they go,
yeah.
But yeah, let's just talk about that. I think we're putting the money in the wrong places. Mm-hmm. We need to put the money in the right places, and if we continue to put the money in the wrong places, well, we can still have the same problem. I mean, again, we just think about it. If we keep dumping millions of dollars into prison systems and not solve the root causes, well, we're still going to have the same problem. And then, and that leads to people complaining. We still have crime. Well, let's really talk about it. Let's really figure out how can we stop crime.
And crime has gone down. There's less crime.
Less crime, but a lot of burglaries. Is the crime not being reported? We know that, mm-hmm. It's saying it's going down everywhere, and that be individuals who are being community activists, going out and saying, hey, let's stop the violence and let's really start to do this. But then you have those individuals like myself that are out there, boots on the ground, that is being overlooked, and they're not getting as funding as they can. And then eventually,
well, your type of programs that are aimed at helping communities that are struggling with funding for nonviolence, for community building. I mean, I think we're seeing across the country that those are the places where funding is being pulled in order to shift that funding toward sustaining tax breaks for the very, very wealthy that have seen their wealth grow more in the last year or two than at any point in the history of our country. And so that is what is happening. Like funding for something that you're trying to do, which is to keep people safe, to reduce violence, to help people heal, to like such noble and wonderful goals around safety and stability. The funding from stuff like that is getting yanked out, and it's being diverted toward, you know, I don't even know what, like building a place to hold immigrants, or hiring bonuses for ICE agents to, you know, to make the conflict in our society about poor people and immigrants, and instead of it being about just massive inequality throughout the entire system.
Yeah, and you got to think about it. You know, like for our organization, every time we pull out funding, we keep getting denied. And over time, eventually, you keep denying organizations like myself or other organizations that's boots on the ground running. Eventually, again, you're going to start to see the increase of crime, because eventually those individuals like myself have to go back to a full-time job. And what happens when you work a full-time job, you ain't going to be able to be boots on the ground. And then that's where in the state of Illinois, we see it a lot. We see the plateau, and then we see the increased curve, and then it goes back down. Well, those increased curves we see when it plateaus. Or
are you talking about increased curves of violence or
increased
of funding?
Curves of violence.
Yeah.
So if you got it, so when people are boots on the ground and they can't keep receiving funding and they got to shut themselves down, then eventually you're going to see the increase of violence. You're going to see that curve. And that's something that when our organization working with the state of Illinois has been vocal about. You have to keep giving organizations stability, right? And this is what we just talked about too, as well as a child. If you don't give those organizations stability where they can keep receiving that funding, well, eventually over time they will shut down. And then eventually over time we will see the increase of violence. And instead of trying to fix the root causes, I think we like putting Band-Aids.
Yeah. And
those Band-Aids is only temporary. And then once it goes back up, then we all say, well, where's the problem? And then the fingers are pointed, instead of saying, wait a second, the finger should be pointed back at those individuals who are able to give those organization fundings and cutting those fundings away for different purposes, when the purpose should be, hey, wait a second, if this is working and these organizations are reducing these and we're not increasing jails or gun violence or burglary, all of it's starting to go down, well, that's what we should continue to do. Instead of, you know what, it's going down, but we don't want to keep funding those organizations because eventually we want it to be chaotic so we can get our money back. And that is a problem, I think, we hear.
It's like the unintended, whenever you're doing policy, you always have to look at the unintended consequences of a policy. And so if you have the work that you're doing decreases crime and decreases violence, then the unintended consequence of that is you don't need as much, you know, maybe your police department could shrink. And then you're talking about, you know, eliminating a position to divert that funding somewhere else. And then you might have a police department that's like, hey, don't take any money away from us. But in order to stay at that level, you need a certain amount of disorder within your system. You know, and I think some of that is it's not judging it. It's just kind of pointing out that, you know, these things all have unintended consequence. Peace and prosperity for everyone will have unintended consequences for existing systems.
Yeah, but we also got to think, is those systems been in place 40, 50, 60 years? They're not working. So I think we got to realize, okay, if they're not working, we should go away with them.
Well, Marianne Williamson ran for president, and she got made fun of a lot because, you know, it would be like if a therapist ran for president, and she wanted to create a Department of Peace. And I felt like that was such a powerful an important concept, and it's emblematic of where we are, that it's like, ha ha ha, like what role does peace have in a nation or as a policy arm? And so we have a president wanting to rebrand as war. And it's like, well, we already know how to go to war. We know how to go to war. We know how to fight. We know how to control each other. We know how to scream at each other. We know how to argue. What we really struggle with is peace. You know, when you talk about getting together with two parts of a community that are in opposition, whether, you know, like gang violence or the business owners downtown and the homeless population, or what we don't know how to do is bring people together and get them to connect around core principles, to come up with solutions with one another, to, you know, exactly the work that you're trying to do, which is like, what is causing the conflict here? What is causing the violence? What other choices and avenues do we have? And how do we help build off shared values like safety or security?
Yeah, and you think about it, if we can reduce that, then we reduce the spending, right? Again, $28 million on a new jail is expensive. That can, especially if you are a city that maybe only have 30,000 people, well, you spent $27 million. You could have divided that $27 million with the 30,000 people or 35,000 people that live in a city. Mm-hmm. And send them a check. Well, what you know, that can make a difference in people's lives. And you got to think of it as that way. If every city spends $28 million on a new jail, and they only have this, even if major cities might have, depending on where you live, a bigger population, mm-hmm. but most populations, depending on what city, we're talking about cities, not as a whole state as a whole. You know, you might
could run a universal preschool program for your entire city,
for free.
Yeah, so that parents, you know, kids could be learning social skills, reading, doing all that stuff, and that parents would be able to pursue some of their own dreams. And our Constitution says the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not necessarily like the pursuit of wealth. And so some humans, like yourself, like if you were really motivated to be rich, you probably wouldn't be in this line of work. But you might be motivated to make the world a better place. Or, you know, we have people in our community who are motivated to be artists. Or, you know, so living in a society where you can support people in what they have reason to value that brings them happiness. And when a society becomes run by people where what makes them happy is a lot of money, and they kind of start to conflate money and happiness, it becomes like, well, the pursuit of happiness is the pursuit of wealth. And it's like, well, that's not really true for everyone. But we have our system set up that it's like money and creating more money, and, you know.
You know, I always thought what made that last part of that pursuit of happiness, what was he really thinking about when he wrote the last part of the pursuit of happiness? And I think we have became pursuit of happiness with materialistics. And we say, well, that's their problem, not my problem. Well, let's just say, again, we have a epidemic right now with drugs. And we got to think about, go back from, I'm from an area where it was DARE mm-hmm. in the 80s during the crack epidemic. And the word was just say no. Right. And we say, and some people say, well, that's not my issue. That's their issue. But then those issues started to move forward and towards their issue and where they stay. And I think that's what we're starting to see now. It's just the effect that we keep saying that it's not our issue when actually it's all of our issues. And I speak this highly. I speak this highly with Illinois, with all the other federal departments I talk to throughout the United States. It's going to take all of us to fix us. Mm-hmm. And if we keep saying it's not, then we're never going to truly fix us. We're just going to have Band-Aids in different areas. And I think we have to come together as people, mm-hmm. right? It's all about the people. And that's what's going to bring us together and understanding at the end of the day, we're all people, and we need to be about for the people.
When I think about economic development in Rock Island, what I think our city council is really grappling with and struggling with, and I like our city council, and they're elected, and they, are doing the best they can to represent the people who voted for them. And so it's always hard because it's like, I want to have real conversations, and real conversations are not always positive. They're difficult, but I wonder if what they're losing sight of right now with some of their policies that are going to really focus on bringing in a new business, making a building look better, being attractive. Like, our city is going to be so beautiful that everyone's going to want to come here because it looks fancy or something, is that they lose sight of the fact that people are your greatest resource. And even the people, who are struggling the most can become your greatest resource if you choose to invest in the stuff and the people that's already here. And I know when we talked on the phone, you had kind of recounted some sort of a program that a family member went through that was effective in combating homelessness. And I was curious if you feel like she can make it and you have time, if you were at all willing to kind of talk about that part of your life. Or
Yeah. When I talked about that program on the phone, that program was in Atlanta, and actually my mom went through that program, and that's what I was talking about because
and patient, because we've been talking for almost 2 hours and she's still hanging in there with us, which is awesome.
That program was ran in Atlanta, and actually it's a very effective program, which I think when we talk about homeless here in Rock Island and to build shelters, I think when I talked to Marcus, who's running for sheriff, I said, I think, you build these homeless shelters was great, and it solves a Band-Aid problem, but it doesn't solve their root cause of the problem, because some people may be homeless because of drug use. And if they're homeless because of drug use, well, if you just keep putting them shelters in and not fixing that root cause, well, we're still going to have the definition of drug use and of homelessness.
And so just to so when we think about the homeless population, it's so diverse. You've got mothers and children, you have seniors, so the causes of homelessness and the conditions of them, shelters are really necessary and wonderful. They're Band-Aids, but they're also life-saving, temporary solutions for people who are in a temporary crisis, like a woman escaping domestic violence, or someone who's just lost a job. But what we're talking about is this more chronic homelessness that might be the result of drug use. And so it's only a fraction of what homelessness is, but it is one of the pieces of homelessness that, when businesses downtown are saying you gotta make sure there's not homeless people walking around, I don't know if they're talking about the moms and babies or about the seniors, or what they're often talking about is people who are struggling with drug addiction and therefore, or mental illness, and therefore are talking to themselves, or maybe more disheveled in their appearance, the people who are suffering and are maybe more chronically homeless. And so I just wanted to draw that distinction, because we need shelters, and we can't get rid of shelters because they are life-saving. But for this population you're talking about, they might not they might not solve a problem. One could argue for that population they could even make a problem worse.
Yeah. And it can. And what, like I said, reference to that program.
You keep getting yourself stuck there, but you also look like you're going to fall asleep.
That program, my mom went through that program, and the first time in her life, actually, she went to a couple conference seminars. She was asked to speak at a couple conference.
So what was going on with your mom?
Again, when we talk about the 80s, when living in the 80s was much different. I guess it was a lot of cultural bias more then, I can say, or it might be still now, but you got to think in the 80s it was a little more different. The world viewed a lot more different. So she got caught in the race of the crack epidemic, and it took her toll on her life. So when she went through that program for the first time in my 40 years of living, in my 40 years of living, well, 39 years of living, my mom been sober for a year and a half without drinking or using any drugs. And
Not until you were in your...
I'm 39. So
39.
So
wow.
So you got to think that program, when I was speaking to you on the phone, was about what she went through it. It was a shelter program, but the whole city was involved in Atlanta. They had Atlanta Falcons come out. They had rappers, R&Bs. They did a lot of things. They had walks. They had runs. They had all these things for them to give them tools to help become sober. They talk about they went to, they had to take buses to go to different rehab centers or classes. They wasn't just in the facility themselves, so they had to go out and still be a part of society instead of being an outcast. And the program lasted a year. She was in it for a year, and then the program, after she got a program, they helped her got a apartment. But halfway through the program, they teach you to get a job so you can start working the job. Because again, that's the part of what I was talking about, the homeless part. If we don't solve the root causes, if some of those individuals are on drugs or have a abusive history of drug use, well, if you don't solve their drug use problem, then all of a sudden you're just going to have homeless people over again. Right, and I think that's what I'm speaking highly about. That program is homeless is something that is effective. It can be losing homes. You lost a job. The economy is so expensive. Rental prices are outrageous.
So
right now.
What I kind of love about that model, you said people with power and who were respected in the community came and were a part of that. The whole community was part of it. I think that highlights something so important, because I bet what that does is reflects back to the people at that shelter. Your life matters. You matter. Like, we're not giving up on you. You're not just some part of society that we're ready to say. On Fox News this week, one of the commentators said, homeless people should be offered lethal injection. Just kill them. This week on Fox News, a very famous Fox News host. And what difference will it make in your daughter's life if your mom is sober from the time you're 39 for the rest of her life?
I mean, that's tremendously, right? Because that's her grandmother. And if we just say, people, again, talk about people, we got to go back to value on people as people, and then you can value their life as a person. And if we just want to say, well, again, we don't know their struggles, because, again, we don't know what can aspire through those homelessness, right? A sense of homelessness. Anything could happen. They could have had a nice job, and then they lost their job, they lost their house, and maybe they didn't know how to deal with it. Maybe they started drinking, and maybe they got introduced to someone that gave them a drug, and now they're on drugs.
Yeah.
And there's so many factors when it comes to homelessness. It's not just, I'm not doing nothing, especially with the house market is so expensive. Food prices are so expensive. And
most of the people who live in Century Woods who are trying to move out and they're trying to find apartments are looking at paying rents that are more than the mortgage on my house.
Yeah, and that's something that has been known to be doing. And if the rental market is so expensive, you leave people, whether they go live in what is government is housing, and they can only work a minimum job, because if they work any more, they can't live there. Well, we keep doing that, and that's not doing a favor to no one.
Well, it is so reminiscent of some system like indentured servitude. It has the echoes of that. It's like this economic system will keep you just at the point of being dependent, but never get you to the place where you have true liberation and like economic freedom. It's the way that the system around poverty always works, where there's all these layers to it, and you have to meet criteria, and you have to be like deserving poor. And so these systems that are meant to support poor people keep people in poverty, because once that mom goes out and gets a job, a minimum wage job. Now she is going to look at paying $1,000 for her rent. So she either needs to stop working or she needs to go out and find higher quality housing. But that minimum wage job is going to, her housing debt is going to be like over 50% of her monthly income. And so if she's set back with a car payment or anything, she'll be homeless. And so we set people up for these systems. And then as cities and states in the country, we say, this is like, we don't want to look at this. This is really unpleasant to have to look at the impact of the way that our society runs. So let's figure out a way to make you go somewhere else. Like, let's make you go to like a different city so that different people can look at you. And I feel like my kind of Rock Island is the Rock Island that is like, yeah, this hurts to look at. This hurts to look at, that there are people in our city that are struggling. And I can feel it in my body. It hurts. But I don't want my solution to be, let's make a different community look at it. Because I think here in Rock Island, we are better equipped to have these conversations, to be creative and loving and people who are dedicated to turning someone who is like your mom in our city into the best economic development tool we have, which is helping her get well, helping her, recover, and then allowing her to like live a life, like live a good life. And you'll be renting and working, and that is economic development. Your mom is a resource. She's a valuable resource to the community that she lives in, to your family, to our world. She's not someone to be forgotten.
No, and you think about it, and she's such a valuable resource, and that valuable resource, she can help another individual that needs that assistance, right? We talk about the rock climber, right? Mm-hmm. Was she in her stages of being sober? Was she a novice at it? No, but now as the time has been come, she has became a little bit more novice in her ability to climb. And next person that may need that helping hand, that's a beginner, she can say, hey, I've been through it. Let me help you out. I think that's where we got it. And that's when I talked to Mayor Ashley. He was such a great saying. He's saying, man, I'm for the people of Rock Island, not what part of Rock Island you're from, not where you're going from, but I'm from the whole city of Rock Island. So again, I like his analogy. I like where he's trying to go with things, what he's trying to do for the city of Rock Island. I mean, that speaks highly of a mayor saying, this is not my job title. It's my job title, but it's not who I am. Mm-hmm. I am for the people, and the people of Rock Island I'm going to fight for, because I want to see my city become great.
Yeah.
And that is something that, like
if only
I said,
he had a vote. It's so frustrating to watch him in the meetings because he can't really
Yeah, and I think that's where our organization and other community members and just in the community in general say, hey, listen, we understand what he's trying to do. We should respect that. And hey, we want the same thing he wants. And to have a mayor that wants those type of things and the people want them too, I think that's what helps everyone get on board and say, okay, mm-hmm. It is not about top of the hill, the bottom of the hill. It's not about cultural bias. It's about, hey, this is what we want for the city, and to make our city such a great city to not only visit, live, enjoy freedom, enjoy safety, and have prosperity, right? Because without those, you're just going to have a city without prosperity.
What are the things you're kind of thinking about doing in the city? Like, let's say somebody wants to get a gun lock, or you kind of talked about doing a summer program this summer. Can you expand a little bit on how we get involved with Under the Helmet, or with some of the things that you're trying to bring to our city?
So our gun lock program, we ask people to, if they have a place where we can set them at, we like put them in gas stations, libraries, anywhere these can be accessible for people to come and get. Because again, some people might own a gun and may not want to go to certain areas or certain places to pick up the gun lock. So we try to find a diversity area where they can they feel more safe to go pick up a gun lock. That's one of our importance.
Do you have them in Rock Island?
We do have them. We have one place in Rock Island at the Rock Island Police Department. We are looking for different locations to house these at. We did have them at the public library here in town. We also put one of our Stop the Bleed kits there because we understand that they're in the downtown area. If there was something ever emergency around that area, especially when it comes to gun violence, that they can come out and use that Stop the Bleed kit that we have handed them to keep on hand, just in case that emergency. We also been trying to talk to a lot of cities, especially the city of Rock Island, to put these kits in every public place. Because again, when the kid brought the gun to school here in Rock Island, well, if that would have turned into tragedy, you think it takes 5 minutes for someone to bleed out. And if those kits are available where you can stop the gunshot from bleeding out, the victim from bleeding out, it's such an importance when it comes to crucial timing or people trying to
So what is inside of the kit?
What's inside the kit is a tourniquet, a warming blanket, a sterile wound gauze that wraps around from burnt marks. They're what is called chest seals, which are very important, and those are to stop gunshot wounds. It goes over the bullet hole. It still leaves it to breathe, so there's air coming through it, so there's still oxygen going through your blood, and it helps reduce the bleeding out from gunshots. So there's just a bunch of kits. That's a bunch of little stuff that's inside of it. But
and we do kind of live in a world where it's like, here's your public exits, and in this space, here's where those kits are.
Yeah.
So that if you're at Schwiebert Park or you're at a movie theater or that you're kind of aware that like if something happens here, here's how I would help to save someone's life.
Yeah. And that's such an importance, right? Because again, they're like, I call them like they're like AEDs. You want to have them in every place that is public, that can be accessible, but also not accessible because not everyone know how to use an AED.
Right.
Even though it's self-explanatory, still you need to know the knowledge to use it. And that's why we like to teach our life-saving practice program here in Rock Island. Unfortunately, we have to keep closing our programs due to funding. And that's where I said comes in. If organizations like mine stop receiving the lack of funding, then what happens is then we don't teach people how to save a life.
Can people donate directly to your organization at UTH? Where would someone go if they want to support what you're doing? Are you kind of like a 501c3? How's that?
We are a 501c3 status. We can go to our Facebook and click the button donate. You can donate there.
Do you find it by searching UTH? What would I type in to
on
find
Facebook? Just type in UTH Riders Foundation. You will see a blue logo which says under the helmet. And you when you click on that on our Facebook, there will be a button where you can say donate, and that donation comes through PayPal, because that's how donations are through Meta or through PayPal.
So if someone wanted to have you come and give a talk or access some of your gun locks, can they just message you through Facebook, or is there a better way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can get a hold of me through Facebook, or you can call our number, which is 309-623-0785, to figure out how gun locks, or if you want us to come and host one of our classes, and learn more about what we're doing, especially in the city of Rock Island with our program. With one of our programs, we believe in our Aim Higher, which is Aim Higher Above the Helmet program, which is a sports kind of program, but also academics. We also know that here in Rock Island that there's and without the city, with Board of Education being dismantled, and with education not being one of our strongest things, not only in the city of Rock Island, but throughout the United States, we plan on doing the academic part of that program. And that program is where we have teachers who are students who are becoming teachers or in college road teachers to come prepare them with students who may be struggling with reading or math. We're looking at, we've been asking the Rock Island here in the district here, 41, if they are willing to support this program. And by supporting the program is having students who are going to roll the program to give us their academics where they're struggling at. So if they're reading at a second grade level and they're going into the fourth grade, well, we want to kind of complete that second grade level
over the summer,
because we also know that kids who lose some of that information over the summer, and then they go back and they're trying to catch up. So if you're going into the fourth grade and you struggle reading in the third grade level because you're still reading at a second grade level, well, you lose some of that what's been taught to you throughout the school district. So we kind of really want to mend that and help that, because we know education is important. Without it, you can't succeed in today's society.
If there were parents in Rock Island who were like, my teenager, I know that they're feeling unsafe and they're fighting with this other kid and there's this kind of conflict brewing, do you do any sort of mediation or have connections to people where a church member, a parent could reach out and say, my 13-year-old had a gun pulled on them. There's some sort of conflict brewing between these kids, and we need an adult to come in that can say, I understand what you're going through. This is my experience at 13. This is how I adapted. And I would encourage you to kind of look at the bigger system. You've got choices, like we can do this a different way. Do you do that kind of a service? Or if someone paid you, would you come in and give a mediation or a talk or something?
Yeah, we do those services because we understand the importance of that, and we know, especially depending on where they're from, if the police presence to be there to be that intervene would not always work, because one, you don't know if that individual is scared to say something to the police because they might feel like they're going to incriminate themselves. So what we try to do is just trying to give an example of what to do, what not to do, how to react, why you feel like you're reacting this way, and what's making you want to cause physical harm to this person by condoning gun violence. I was a witness of that myself last year in Davenport, where I witnessed that kid Mason got killed. And I tried to save his life, and I talked to his brother, and me and his brother had really good conversations. And I talked to his parents and told him, hey, it's best to have his brother move out, because he watched his own brother die. And I know the effects that can have on someone and what the retaliation would be like. So I really stayed connected with him and talked to him and trying to understand, like, it's okay. I know it's bad and it's going to make you angry, and you're going to want revenge. But then again, not only if you seek revenge, not only now your mom will lose twice, because now she's going to have to come see you behind bars. So I try to make things thinking like that, in that nature, because again, our organization wants to stop people from going incarcerated or being incarcerated. And also those who are coming home, we kind of really want to feel in a safe place, because sometimes when they come home, they feel out of place as well, because the society said, well, you're a felon, you really don't belong in this world. So I think we're just trying to help all organizations especially that is on the front for it, that want to change, and that is partnering with them as well, and working that connection, and just, again, being that rock climber that's giving helping hands to help pull our communities together to make them safe.
Wow. Yeah, that's so wonderful to know that you're here, that you need funding, but as long as the funding, keeps coming, that your organization is here and that you're available to cities and to individuals around all these topics around keeping people safe, creating security. And to your point, from all the things you've said, when you feel safe, when you feel secure, you can be creative, you can learn, you can love others, you can have empathy. When your existence is threatened, when you're feeling very unsafe, it's hard to move beyond those core, how do I keep myself safe today, into how do I think creatively about society? You need a level of safety before you can So I feel so bad that I've kept you so long. I feel like we need to give a shout out to your daughter because she's been
right. No worries. Again, like our organization thrives on working in the community. We like being boots on the ground. We like to be involved. A lot of organizations don't try to be as involved as we are, but we like to be involved because in order for us to solve the issue problem and solve it, we have to be on the ground. We have to be there. We have to have our presence.
Hello.
And with that being said, it's just a great thing to do is for us to be involved. And we feel like with support of just not only other organizations that support our organization as we support theirs, but the city as well, in the cities, because without the city involvement or without the community involvement supporting our organization, again, eventually that we have to subside and go away, which we don't want to do because we see as such a need for things that need to be changed. And just looking at all the root causes, we want to solve the root causes. Our organization don't want to put Band-Aids on things anymore because we know that won't solve an issue. It would be temporary. We want to, where we serve, not even if it's in the city of Rock Island, but throughout the state of Illinois, that we want to make sure that everyone is safe and everyone feels safe. And that's what our organization is continue to do.
What do you hope for your daughter? Since she's here and she's a part of this podcast today, she seems so full of life and she's so curious as she's been walking around the studio and has really hung in here for 2 hours just kind of entertaining herself and interacting with you. And, when we think about secure attachment in my world of therapy, she's obviously securely attached. Like she wanders off to do something. She comes back in to check in with you. She's, what do you hope for her?
Her to grow up safe in a safe environment. I mean, that's what I think as our parents, we want to see our kids be in a safe environment, but be prosperous and in their own way. I think that's what I want as a parent, even though, my dreams and aspirations might be different, but I still want her to be able to follow her dreams and aspirations with no hinder, without feeling like she has to be someone else in order to fit in. I think that's my biggest thing for her is still having that same innocent, loving, caring self without it being tarnished. I think that's my thing I would like. I hope that's what every parent would want their kid to be, not to be judged who they are or what they look like, and just let them be them. Yeah. And I think for me, she's 2. I said that when my 17-year-old, and now she's in a world where it's chaotic at 17, and it just makes me think, what my grandkids going to be like. Is the world still going to be chaotic? And if it is, do we have to separate ourselves or put ourselves in a small area to make sure we are safe? And no one wants to confine themselves to make sure they are safe. I think that's what I want for my 2-year-old.
Yeah, that is. Do you think, you have a 17-year-old and a 2-year-old. Are you a different parent today with your own emotions and emotional regulation? And is it different parenting today than, I feel like I got better as I got more experience because I have 4 kids as well. How do you think you're doing today as a father versus 17 years ago?
Oh, 17 years ago, it was a life experience. I grew up without a father, so it was learning, am I a great father? Am I being a father? What is that as a father? Because, I didn't know that. And then, how I was raised, when I was raising my 17-year-old, I kind of, okay, this is how I was raised. This is how it's going to be. With my 2-year-old, it's just, okay, I raised my 17-year-old this way, and this is the way I was raised. But as time went on, realizing that parenting evolves, and now as a father to a 2-year-old, it has involved like a lot more patience and understanding, right, as a kid needs, and that's I could say that's the difference now, the understanding and patience of what it takes to be a father and what it takes to make sure your kid feels safe and grow up in a good environment.
Wow. Yeah, I work with parents, mostly women, but I've worked with women my whole life. And there's an author, I'm going to blank on her name, but she talks about ghosts in the nursery. And those are the things that we carry with us from our own childhood. And they can be so subtle. So they can be just like a feeling we had with our own parent. And so, you lost one parent and you, in some ways, lost another parent to addiction. They were maybe physically there, but like the lights weren't on. And so there can be that feeling of like loneliness. And then all of a sudden we're parents and our kids are that age and we start to feel lonely in our adult lives. Like we almost like have these parallel emotional experiences when the kids get to the ages that we were, that we experienced stuff in our own childhood. And so this job of parenting, and it sounds like maybe you're experiencing this with your daughter now, can be this healing. What did I need when I was that old? What did that look like? What's coming up for me? And how do I be the grown-up that I needed? And yeah, you seem like a very patient dad. And
yeah. And I think that's where again, we talk about that stability, right? As if you have that stability as a kid and that safety net, when you get an adult, you have that safety, that feeling, how to regulate your emotions. Again, if you grew up in the 80s, parenting was way different than it is now. Yeah. And you talk about, what was said in this house goes in this house. You had no say. And, think about that and people, as a parent now thinking, well, they kind of do have a say, think about it, because I wanted to say something and I wasn't allowed to say how I was feeling. So, but as now I think, no, I want them to be able to regulate their emotions, because if that's what they're there for. Yeah. And I'm supposed to help them go through those emotions. If I silence those emotions, then they will never know how to do it as an adult.
There's there's so many books on kids I love. One is The Whole Brain Child. But another one is, I don't even know if it's out yet. It's called Sturdy Parenting. So it's not like gentle parenting, but it's also not that really strict parenting. It's where you have a backbone, you have a firm backbone, but a soft front, where you can allow for your child to express and to have an idea and to be upset, but still hold a boundary with them. And then that also helps them understand, how do I work with the boundary? Parenting isn't about giving them everything they want, and it's not about forcing them. It's so hard. I mean, I struggle with it every day.
And then that's why I like Bluey. To be honest with you, Bluey has it sounds so crazy to think about a cartoon, but it has a lot of teaching moments. It teaches the kid what it's like to be a parent. It teaches the parent understanding of the child, but it also has a lot of life lessons. Like one episode had the kids winning everything, and then one parent says, well, no, that's not how we was raised. Let's make them understand that it's okay, sometimes you're going to lose. Yeah. And I think that was such a great episode, because it taught the kid it's okay, sometimes I am going to lose, and how do I deal with that emotion and when I lose. I think now we as parents and as in a society, we try to make everyone win, and when they get adults, when they lose, they don't know how to regulate that adult emotion of loss, so they or frustration or disagreement.
I always tell moms this, like, you can't be so good for your child that when they go out into the world, they won't know how to interact with anyone else. Like, the best parents actually are not perfect parents. They don't reduce every difficulty and challenge and frustration of their children, but they support them. They support them in you're really frustrated, and here's what we do with our frustration. Maybe I can support you with your frustration, but I'm not going to solve it for you either, because exactly all the stuff we're seeing in the world right now, it's like a bunch of adults who don't know how to be frustrated.
Yeah.
Who don't know how to be disagreed with.
Yeah, and I think that's what that stability comes from, and that's what our organization, thrives on, is trying to make a community stability and safe. Mm-hmm. And once you have that, you'd be surprised what can be done.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to continue to work on here in the city of Rock Island and throughout the Quad Cities as well.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you. This was kind of a wide-ranging, all over the place conversation, but that's just kind of how I roll. And you hung in with me, and she hung in with me. So cute. Anything else you want to say or share, or?
I'm just hoping that our organization can stay around for a long time. We have a vision for not only through the state of Illinois, but through Rock Island. And
when are you going to move to Rock Island? That's what I want to know.
Well, we're looking for, our organization is actually looking for a front downtown. We just talked to the Safer QC Foundation, and QC Safer Foundation, and we also know that there's no adult GED program here in the city of Rock Island. We know it's all the way in Moline at Black Hawk College. And unfortunately, I have talked to a lot of individuals, and if a kid, and also adult and kids, or teenagers, when they get out, if they didn't want to go to school every day, it's possible that they're going to get on the city bus, take public transportation to go to Black Hawk.
Yeah.
So we're trying to look for an area downtown where we can turn.
And there's like a whole building at Century Woods. It's the old administration building. I'm not sure what's going on in there, what they do in there, but that was the point originally, was they were required to have a GED class on that property, and it never worked out that way. But there is space there. I mean, if that would be, if they would be agreeable to it, and.
Yeah, I believe that's, if they created that space for that, then that's what should be. I mean, we can't keep creating spaces and not utilizing the spaces we created for that space. So that's what we're trying to figure out what we do, because again, we know with juveniles, if you just dropped out of high school, if you don't have a GED, well, it's going to be hard for you to find a good paying job, or you be enroll in colleges, or try to find a trade that you can go to college for.
Yeah.
We also know with adults re-entering from prison systems, if they don't have a GED, well, they have two things against them. They criminal record and not having a GED or a high school diploma, which then that kind of hinders them as tremendously. So again, we just want to fill the voids and those gaps in. That's what our organization is really here for, is to fill and void the gaps that has been missing, or that is struggling to survive and need assistance.
Do you have to poop? Do you have to go potty? She's so cute.
Oh, I think she did potty.
Well,
did you poopy? I think you did.
I'm out of that stage, so I'm done changing diapers until I have grandkids. But well, thank you so much. Thanks for talking about so many different things, and I'm sure we will keep running into each other. But I'd be super excited if you guys kind of relocated in Rock Island, and then for Rock Island, it's like, how do we get a family like yours to move here? What would be so attractive about our city that you'd be like, we're gonna move. We're gonna just choose to raise our children in Rock Island. And my guess is safety, stability, quality education, affordable housing. I'm sure it's all those things.
Yeah, and again, like I said, when I spoke to Mayor Ashley, that's what his plan is for the city of Rock Island. And again, I love that, because it speaks highly of what he sees his city as, and what he wants the city as. And that's what our organization want to be part of, but individually, that's what I want to be part of. I want someone that says, okay, I'm not worried about what's happening up here or down here. I'm worried about how can we fix the city as a whole, and what can we do? Like, what attractions,
Yeah.
My thing is attractions, things to do.
Yeah.
Family things to do.
Like Rock Island the Quad Cities doesn't have an aquarium, and we have some big buildings down here that I'm like, oh, they should do like a kids aquarium. There's so many ideas, but Well, Journey, we'll let you go home because I can tell as soon as you get in the car, you're going to pass out. I sense it with those eyes. What time does she normally take a nap?
Around noonish.
Okay. Yeah.
Noonish, 12:30ish.
Well, thank you so much, Antaeus, and we'll stay in touch. And I appreciate you being on. And it was a real. She's pulling the bag over. She's like, Dad, come on now, let's get out of here.
No, she knows poopies.
Oh, she's like, take care of this business. Yeah,
that's why she keeps saying poop.
That's
poop.
so funny.
She reminds me of my 17-year-old.
I bet you're gonna be potty trained soon, because that when they start to like notice it and ask for it to be changed, and yeah, you're on top of things.
That was my 17-year-old. She used to say poopies, and she'd take it off. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh my God, good. So she reminds me of the same thing. So
yeah,
still so far distance of a gap. But
that's awesome. And let's normalize having children involved in leadership, because one of the barriers to leadership is often economic. Like if you're wealthy and you don't have to have a job, you can afford to be a leader in the community. That's something I am privileged with, is like some of the things I've done with my business and everything put me in a position where I can take the time to be involved. When my kids were that age, I couldn't have, because every day was like, oh my God, how are we going to, but also being able to have children around as you're in positions of leadership, because if not, you wouldn't be able to participate. And so, for people to consider that young families and working people and people who have little kids, if you can't have little kids around when you're leading, that would take a lot of people out of leadership.
Yeah, and you just think about it, is the more they watch that and see that, the more they can say, oh, I want to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. I want to be change of that. This is what I seen growing up. Again, we're talking about what we see.
The modeling.
And there's the modeling. Is it the good role models that needs to be seen more instead of the bad role models? I think having this experience, and she, like I said, she goes everywhere with me, and she sits in all type of meetings, and I thought, you never know what she might be.
She's picking up.
Meetings. Yeah, she's picking up.
She's learned how to read a room, and Well, thank you guys both so much for being here, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. So thank you. Do you want to say bye in the microphone? Do you want to say bye-bye?
Can you say bye-bye?
She's like, Can you say it in here? In his microphone?
Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Say bye-bye.
Bye.
She's so cute. Thank you to Antaeus and his daughter Journey for being my guests on the podcast today. Our conversation has me reflecting deeply on the importance of feeling safe and stable in a society. When people feel stable and safe, they can go on to be creative, to be loving, to take care of each other, and to pursue happiness. I invite all of us to consider how we promote feelings of safety in ourselves and in the people around us. Thank you for caring about Rock Island. Thank you for caring about others in your community. And I'll see you next time on the Rock Island Line.